What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we are ranking the albums of Evergrey. Alright, this was an interesting one, and as per usual, I think some of my takes here are going to be a little bit hot and spicy, especially probably for the longtime fans, but I just like to share my opinion, and we're going to start right from the beginning on The Dark Discovery in 1998. So the vocals on this one, it was interesting to hear, having been more familiar with the later stuff, because it's more of like a Lane Staley vibe going against the atmospheric chorals and melodeath riffing. So it makes it kind of unique, and it's an interesting fusion of styles that I feel like a lot of legacy bands were seemingly trying to achieve at this time, but none quite as successfully. Like, I kind of liked it. It was different, but it sort of worked for me, and I liked how heavy this album was. And then even the acoustic sections sound pretty awesome with the vocal harmonies and the ambience, the vast reverb on the production I really enjoy, but also some chunky riffs on par with Metallica in places. So not one of their best, a little bit messy, but overall, a pretty strong start. I'm going to go ahead and put it at B tier. Next up is Solitude Dominance Tragedy in 1999. So similar sound on this one, but kind of tightening up some of the songwriting and production. The vocal performance is a little bit more consistent, more of that kind of like Michael Bolton energy seeping in, as I always say. I joked on Twitter that I feel like Evergrey is just Michael Bolton for metalheads, and I stand by that. Like, I really do. And it's not an insult either. Like, Michael Bolton's a phenomenal singer. The guitars sometimes remind me of Faith No More in places, which was interesting, but the compositions settled into more of sort of like a, I don't know, Scorpions and Journey meets Dream Theater vibe, throwing in some curveballs like the fiddle on the opening track, more emphasis on the synth. It's good, but a little bit too melodramatic, especially with the spoken word stuff. So while I think certain elements are objectively better here, I feel like the final product isn't as interesting to me. Like, I found myself less engaged all the way through, if that makes sense. So I'm actually going to put this one at C tier. Then we have In Search of Truth, 2001. So getting more and more refined and focused on progressive elements and overall atmosphere. This was a really high-rated album on Metal Storm. I'm always interested to look at their site in particular, because that's fan ratings as opposed to critical ratings. It's also beloved by critics, though, at the time as well. And I was interested because usually I see that and I'm like, okay, this is like a turning point. This is where I'm going to probably start enjoying the album more as well. Not always. And in this case, it wasn't. Like, I found it to be kind of underwhelming. I just didn't think the hype was there. Maybe it just has to do with different tastes, but I just found it to be pretty corny a lot of the time. Like, State of Paralysis, Different Worlds, and Mark of the Triangle are a bit over the top even for them. Like, I enjoy that there is sort of a certain amount of cheesiness just baked into this style, but I can generally enjoy it. And here, I don't really. I feel like this is more of almost like a pop album, which was not what other people were describing. So it may just be another one of those, again, albums where just personal taste is a big part, because the performances here, objectively, are actually pretty great. It's just not really my style. As always, these are just my rankings. You can leave your own down in the comments and we can have a fun disagreement down there. I'm going to put this one at C tier. Recreation Day, 2003. So after that, it was nice to open this one with a ripping solo and something on the faster side. Back to more focus on guitars, I would say, which is definitely more my speed, more of a guitar-focused guy in general. Still corny, and especially the title track, and I'm Sorry, but also some really great moments. Like, I love the organ with the palm-muted guitars on As I Lie Here Bleeding, those spiraling Dream Theater guitars on Visions. Blinded and Your Darkest Hour are veritable riff machines that'll even get your head banging in places. I quite enjoyed this one. I'm going to put it at B tier. Still not like top quality for them, but good stuff. The Inner Circle, 2004. So another lame opening track for me on this one. I feel like Ambassador would be a stronger start with the chugs and synths. That's a pretty solid track in here. In the Wake of the Weary is like peak goofy though. So this is an interesting discography where there's a lot of ups and downs for me. It's a very much a roller coaster. And another one too where I just looked at the fan ratings and I was like, why is this one so high? I don't get it. Is it just so far removed from what I like? Again, I even love a lot of the corny like 80s power ballads out there, but these are just lame without the qualities that make those tracks fun for me. So I'm just confused. Help me understand, like as somebody who loves this album, tell me why. Help me understand what I'm missing. But I'm putting this one all the way at D tier. Monday Morning Apocalypse 2006. So we start with a heavier track on this one, but it feels really half-baked, very subpar vocal performance here. Atypical from those last few albums in that Tom even hits some raw notes on this one. Like most of those other albums, even if I don't enjoy the style, I again objectively can appreciate like, wow, that's like a really strong vocal performance. Here, it wavers a lot, and I'm not exactly sure why. I also think the songwriting is a little thin, a little bit even butt-rocky at times, I would say. The production sounds weaker. So at least the other albums had those good performances to hold them up, but a lot of this is just borderline unlistenable to me. There are a few cool riffs, but not a single song I really enjoyed from start to finish. This was probably my least favorite album, so another one at the bottom of D tier. All right, then we got Torn. So some of those issues show up on this album as well, but the improvement in the songwriting largely makes up for it. Like there are some genuinely great riffs, like the kind of In Flames ones on Soaked and In Confidence, getting super heavy on Fear with the alternations of palm muting with the dueling picking patterns. Numb and Nothing Is Erased have got a really infectious groove to get your head bobbing. Very hook focused in this one, which is much more again up my alley. Not Tom's best work, but better than the last one, and the guitars carry a lot of the weight. Honestly, sounds overall like a 2000s, again, In Flames album, but without the screaming. To be honest, it was a chore to get through some of those previous ones, but not this one. I was actually really enjoying myself the whole time here. I almost put it in the upper tiers, but there are some that beat it out. And again, my rule is always like I want to keep it kind of balanced, so we're having no more than 3 per tier. I'm going to put this one at pretty high, like the top of B tier. Back down again we go though with Glorious Collision. Appropriately, we've got the image of the person plummeting, and that's how I feel about the discography at this point. Again, this is in 2011, and so yeah, the riffs just gone. That's not entirely true. There are some, but not nearly as consistently throughout. There's some standout tracks here with Restoring the Loss, Out of Reach, It Comes From Within. Better production too, and better performance from Tom on this one, but just again, not finding these compositions really sticking with me. I was a little bit bored. Not terrible, not great. I'm gonna throw this one also in C tier. Hymns for the Broken 2014. So this feels like a big step up back into the big production and atmosphere, and I feel like this is like the turning point for their modern discography overall. Based on the ratings, fans seem to also notice a significant resurgence at this point, so we could agree here. Love the piano on A New Dawn and Archaic Rage. The latter also has a wicked classic rock guitar solo. Even the softer tracks here feel better written and not exactly cheesy. Then you've got some memorable riffing on Barricades, The Fire, The Grand Collapse. Still not my favorite, but definitely a very strong entry here. I'm going to put it at A tier. Following that up with The Storm Within in 2016. So I heard this album cited a lot in the comments when I did my first Evergrey review, and I asked people which album I should check out. So picking up where the last album left off, I would say really making a statement on that opening track with a big build and epic soloing. Awesome synths on Passing Through. Astray is a fun one with solid guitar work, and Tom in absolute top form. My Allied Ocean and Disconnect bring back the chuggy melodeath riffs of Torn, but with stronger vocal performances to elevate them this time. Great dynamic songwriting. Maybe just a touch long, and personally I could have used a little more in the guitar hooks department, but the atmosphere is unquestionable. I'm still also going to put this one at A tier. Maybe even a little bit higher. Another one that got shouted out a lot was The Atlantic in 2019. So a modern album cited as elevating their career, which is always impressive when a band has been around already for this long of a time. Like, that's pretty wild to me when you're creating some of your best work decades into your career. A silent arc kicks things off on a heavy note with genty riffs and a pretty expansive, progressive approach. And then they keep that going with the groovy hook and ominous synths on Weightless. Anglin's vocal melodies also continue to feel more thoughtful and catchy as a result. The atmosphere and production continue to improve each album, making even the ballads sound absolutely massive at this point. It feels like a better balance of light and heavy songwriting than the previous one, with tracks like A Secret Atlantis, Currents, Beacon, and This Ocean. I also love the bass tone alongside the piano on Departure. Some of their peak songwriting abilities on display here, definitely. I'm putting this one at S tier. And then Escape of the Phoenix 2021. This was actually the first Evergrey album that I listened to all the way through. Better late than never, I always say. Part of my dedication to stepping outside of my comfort zone and trying new things, which is something I ask of my audience, so I feel like it's only fair that I do as well. The single Eternal Nocturnal is what initially sold me. Fantastically written song with fun riffs and a killer chorus that does its job by getting stuck in your head and compelling you to sing along every single time. I would say one of their best. Forever Outsider makes for a great opener. Love the Dark Tranquility-esque synth lines of Where August Mourns. Great clunky bass rumble and architectsy riffs on Dandelion's Cypher. The title track goes full on Meshuggah, among their heaviest to date, I would say, alongside Lead Saint, which is also super proggy. Anglin sounding just better than ever. Like one of his best performances on a full album, I would say. I really enjoyed it. I actually gave it a B when I graded it in the review at the time, but for my taste in comparison to the rest of these and just having listened to it over a longer time, I might be biased because it's my entry album, but I'm putting this all the way at the top of S tier. And then that brings us to A Heartless Portrait, the Orphean Testament in 2022. So this feels pretty closely in line with that last one overall, with some changes. Save Us has a super chuggy main riff to kick things off on a heavy note, not to mention a pretty catchy chorus and some serious ripping soloing. Maybe not as great as the single on the last one, but still a really strong one. Midwinter Calls has a fantastic vocal performance complete with backing OOs as well as some fun backing synths, some additional effects as well. Seriously, get this guy on Dream Theater. I know they did a collab together on their own album on the last one, but I think he's honestly better than James. That may be a super hot take, but I would love to hear like a full Dream Theater album with Tom doing the vocals. The Orphean Testament is another riff-heavy track on the metal side of things, even with some very Gothenburg, again, Melodeath sounding leads straight out of this time like an Arch Enemy or Soilwork album. Blindfolded as well with the genty Periphery-esque riffing that really gets the adrenaline pumping and perfectly punctuated with the little breaks in the guitar going into another catchy chorus. The Great Unwashed sounds absolutely massive with the big wailing guitars and shimmering synth line getting particularly bombastic on this one, in addition to some proggier riffs and a massive guitar solo alongside the big pounding toms. But somewhat surprisingly, it's the softer cuts on this album that have stuck with me the most. Like Reawakening, for instance, is one of their best power ballads to date, maybe the best, I don't know, with that Michael Bolton energy again coming through strong. I will not rest until that collab happens, y'all. And on this song, there's that one falsetto note he hits during the chorus in particular that gets me every single time. And similarly, Heartless just gets me caught up in the melodrama and singing along every time. Just very passionate, palpable emotion coming through. Now, I wouldn't say the album isn't without some filler, like specifically Ominous is kind of unmemorable and Wildfires is a pretty typical and kind of unremarkable acoustic closer. So not quite as good as the last one, I would say, but still some of their higher quality stuff. I'm going to put this one up at A tier. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more metal tier lists, and let me know down in the comments, what do you think of these albums? Which one's your favorite Evergrey album and why? But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.